to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rotten about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
Thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And they got away.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal!
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. It is time once again for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Episode 356 tonight. Wow, those are a lot of numbers. It's been a little bit. I have been out playing music, and I am back doing the show, and happy to be doing it, and very happy to be presenting tonight's guest, which has been a long time coming. We'll get to that, though. We'll get to that. Before we do any of that, welcome to Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. I am your host, Conan Neutron. I'm a rock and roll lifer that's been touring and recording for 23 years, most known for the band Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. Music is a huge part of my life, and use the format of this very long-running podcast to talk about music with musicians whose work I enjoy and respect, but who may not be household names. This is episode 356. If this is your first time listening to the show, archives of it are available for free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding at protonicreversal.com. However, if you want to support the show and get episodes sooner, $1 a month at patreon.com/protonicreversal will achieve that goal. And if you like the show or even just a single episode, please feel free to like, subscribe on your platform of choice, share it around the internet, even leave a review. All that helps people discover the show. It beats back the almighty algorithmic overlords. This is a darn nice thing to do, really. So there you go. We have a drumming legend on tonight. I'm very excited for this. One of my favorite drummers of all time, and drummer for a band that I easily would slot into one of my favorite bands of all time. And he is, I would say he needs no introduction, but that would be very weird because I'm literally giving him an introduction right now. But I am very excited. This is a long time coming to talk to Mr. Todd Trainer. Todd, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Conan. I'm flattered.
I think you have a unique thing in your playing in that people in the know can instantly identifiable. They can tell who it is. Which is, I think a lot of musicians are strive for that, and maybe with a limited success. But you have your own drumming voice. You have drumming hooks. You have drumming patterns that are, you can sing them, right? Musical drumming, right? I guess is the best way of trying to put it. Now, I know that before starting in with Shellac, you were in situations where, with Rifle Sport, there was another drummer that existed before you, and you were kind of you were doing what you do in that band, and then also you had done things like emulated drum machine and things like that. Now, to my personal taste as a fan, it seems to me like Shellac is when things really started to open up for you. Am I off base on this as far as developing your own style and really playing the way you want to play?
No, actually, Conan, you're spot on. The first band I performed in was Rifle Sport. I was not the original drummer. I was a gigantic fan of the band prior to joining the band, and the drummer at the time was an incredible drummer, ridiculously great drummer. So I was put in a position to attempt to play his parts, essentially. And, did my best to do so and do him justice. And it was fun. It was thrilling being in that band. My second band was a band called Breaking Circus.
Breaking Circus, sure, yeah.
And that was the first record done with a drum machine. The first record Breaking Circus has recorded was a drum machine, a bass player, and the guitar player who wrote all the songs and sang. So then I was literally duplicating machine-orientated drum parts.
Right.
So I was pretty good at playing other people's stuff. But it wasn't until I joined Shellac, which it was Steve and I actually just started out kind of organically, the two of us. The original concept was I would play drums for his songs and he would play drums for my songs, which at the time I did a thing called Bricklayer Cake.
Bricklayer Cake, yeah.
Very elementary, very simple drumming, intentionally so. And Steve could play all those parts, so that was the idea. We were to just travel around as a two-piece, and I would play, I would sing my songs, he would play drums, and then he would play his songs, and I would play drums. But he had a lot of ideas that they were lacking in the low-end department, and we thought a bass player might complete that situation. So, yeah, we've been a three-piece now for 32 years or close to it.
I was going to say it's been a little while, yeah.
And
that's interesting you say that too, because when I think of my classic instrument switcher band, I think of a Sloan, where both guys are great drummers, but they have like such different styles, and it's kind of interesting to hear like in the same. Well, it's also kind of awkward to, okay, I'm gonna go over here now, and now I'm gonna go over here, and everything's gonna grind to a halt while this happens, I suppose. But I think that certainly would be unprecedented, to be sure. And Steve's not a bad drummer. I've heard him play drums. He's pretty good.
Well, so Steve and I, the first couple of years, it was just him and I kind of continuing along those lines, writing a bunch of songs. For probably the first 8 or 10 years of Shellac, Bricklayer Cake would open for Shellac shows. Not always with him playing drums. Would do solo things. I would do guitar trio things, kind of a lot of different little configurations. But I agree, it's a little awkward to just switch from one to another.
Yeah, and then also when you strike on something, very powerful, then that's that's no. I mean, the first thing that I heard from you guys was guy who invented fire.
First song we ever wrote.
And it's sort of like from the first note, it's like, oh, this is interesting. There's something here. And so what point does Bob come in the picture? Because I kind of know this story, but I want to hear you say it and make sure that I'm right.
Well, to be honest, the first bass player that we started to play with was Camilo Gonzalez
from Zenigiva, right?
No, a Chicago guy. Zenigiva was a Japanese band.
Yeah.
Camilo was a member of Naked Ray Gun.
Band. Sure.
Legendary Chicago band.
See, Todd, this is where I show that I'm not a native Midwesterner, because I'm like, oh yeah, but I don't have this foundational knowledge. Apologies.
Well, yeah, Camilo. No apologies necessary. Camilo was a incredible bass player, sweet guy, and he plays on. I think we kept him on one of the singles as kind of a nod to his service early on. Right. He didn't last very long, because as soon as we entertained the idea of touring and traveling, he had no interest in it whatsoever. So he just bowed out. No hard feelings. He's like, if you guys want to do anything more than hang around in the basement and make singles, then I'm probably not your guy. So
good on him to recognize that,
Yeah, no, it was great that we never got further into it with him. And I did enjoy playing with him, because I was a fan of Naked Ray Gun, of course, sure, yeah. and he was a phenomenal bass player. So Camilo was a great fit, with the exception of his lack of interest and enthusiasm in touring. So Bob Weston entered the picture when Steve said, hey, do you know this band Volcano Suns? And I said, yeah, of course. Rifle Sport had happened to play a show with Volcano Suns in Columbus, Ohio, a club called Stashes. that a lot of people had, I bet I had played 10 or 12 shows in there before I met Bob, between Rifle Sport and Breaking Circus and Bricklayer Cake. And, you know, I was a fan of Volcano Suns, especially an album of theirs, The Bright Orange Years, just a fantastic record. And Steve he needed engineering help, like more studio assembly help, I should say, while he was constructing his studio or thinking about it. So he wanted Bob, I think, to come and help him with some plans, if I remember correctly. But in any case, he said, hey, what do you think about giving Bob Weston a go on bass? And, you know, Bob was just the perfect fit.
Yeah.
Fantastic bass player, incredible human being, wonderful organizer. He now handles most of the tour organizational aspects of being in a band for us. Yeah.
Real treasure of a man, seriously.
Absolutely. He really is, of course. Yeah.
So I find it interesting that at the time Shellac is sort of coming together, these early singles, right? That it felt like there was a very patient, from an outside perspective as a fan, a very patient process. We're talking like 1993 here, that there was the guy invented fire, which we invoked, the Uranus single, not signal, with Doris and Wingwalker. And then there was the Bird is the most popular finger, right? Which is this, I remember correctly, that's a 6-finger satellite homage to their Pigeon's most popular bird, that title, right? But that's
Correct.
all like kind of rapid succession, coming right after another, with the idea of like, hey, let's just let this develop into what it's going to be. Or was the idea to present them as singles and then like, oh, and we're going to do a record later? Or was there even any worry about it at that point?
No, I don't think there was no worry about anything at all. The band was in an unusual situation in the sense that me being a resident of Minneapolis and Steve residing in Chicago required an 800-mile round trip in order to rehearse. So the original band situation was I could catch a cheap flight out of Minneapolis at midnight on a Friday.
Right.
Or 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And then I could return on midnight on Sunday or 6 a.m. on a Monday morning. Those are kind of my cheap options. I could do that round trip for $100, but the schedule was brutal. And I was working a full-time job at the time. So I would typically show up to Steve's house. You know, I'd fly out of Minneapolis at 6, arrive in Chicago at 7, show up at Steve's house around 8. And there was in the house he lived in at the time, there was a corner store, and I'd always pop in and grab a little 6-pack of brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts.
I love those, by the way. Those are great.
I haven't had them for years, but Steve and I have had our share of them, no doubt. So I'd grab Pop-Tarts and wake him up, and we'd get some coffee started, and we'd go down and we'd literally start playing loud rock music at 10 in the morning, you know, and we kind of go for it all weekend. So I think our productivity was very unlike most bands that may get together a couple of times a week, 3 or 4. Even in my early days, my bands did 5 nights a week. Both Rifle Sport and Breaking Circus did 5 nights a week. But I think it's pretty common now with people to do less than that. But Steve and I would see each other once every couple of months, and we'd go for, 16, 18, 20 hours over the course of a weekend. So it was a lot less regular, but a lot more intense.
It's almost like band concentrate, just add water, right? It's like more.
Yeah, well, essentially. And Steve and I are both relatively intense individuals, so pretty focused and pretty dedicated. So it worked for us.
In those early days, I mean, that's got to be some major, like, psychic whiplash to go from, just being immersed fully in this creative pursuit and doing this, and then, wham, right back into, everyday life immediately. Was that jarring?
Well, I was still in Rifle Sport at the time, actually. So I was rehearsing in some cases 7 days a week. I would do Rifle Sport rehearsal. I could. Rifle Sport did double duties. We shared a rehearsal space with Breaking Circus, actually, Breaking Circus shared the Rifle Sports rehearsal
Sure,
space, to
sure.
be more honest.
Yeah.
And so our schedule was, I worked 9 to 5, which was 8:30 to 5 in reality. And then it was Rifle Sport rehearsal 6 to 8. It was Breaking Circus rehearsal 8 to 10. And I could still catch a flight to Chicago and be rehearsing with Steve at 10 the following morning. So that went on for, I don't know, a year or two, a couple, maybe 3 at the most. Yeah.
That's a lot to handle.
Work was just most people, work was just this, we worked and expected to work in order to do the thing we loved, which I think a lot of people still do.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you're, I didn't realize that all that was happening at the same time too. That's a lot to.
The Breaking Circus thing ended really quickly, so that didn't overlap. Yeah, but the Rifle Sport Shellac thing overlapped for a couple of years.
So, with those first, again, with those first singles, those first batches of songs, is it something where it just kind of made itself known through the act of you guys creating and playing together, or was there more of like a guiding vision towards certain things? And the things I'm speaking about is the word minimalism gets thrown a lot with Shellac, and that's something that I both agree with, and I also think can be a little bit reductive as well, because ultimately you're playing music and it's going to come out the way it's going to come out based on the musicians involved. But was there a guiding principle as far as, okay, we should do something more like this? Or maybe a better question might be, unlike this other thing? Because again, remembering that this is like 93, right? So there was a lot flying around then.
Yeah, it would have been earlier than that when Steve and I were just getting things off the ground. The first few conversations that we had, the first couple of weekends, in all honesty, that we got together, I would say half of it was just conceptualizing what was great about the things we had done, the bands that we had been in or were currently in, and what wasn't so great. What would we like to continue? What would we do the same? What would we do differently? The minimalist aspect of the band, I think, comes from, Steve is not a noodler. And
right.
and neither am I, to be honest. I'm a minimalist person, and I keep my houses minimal. I try to keep my life pretty simple, and so the minimal aspect of my drumming is definitely intentional, but it's also comes quite naturally to me.
Yeah, and it's not to say that one is superior to the other necessarily, but there are people that are the notes per minute players that are sometimes that can be lovely, and sometimes that can be
absolutely
impressive, and I can name 5 off the top of my head that I love that do that. But to me, the most striking thing about hearing the band was like, oh wow, this is like sparse but intense. Like there was a clarity that almost seemed like a clarity of purpose from, like, again, the first note of the first song. And it's not that that's the only thing that you guys were doing, but I wonder how much of that it was just what was coming out or if it was planned. Also, I mean, you also had the ability to, and this is something, you had the ability to record somewhat easily as well. Right, which is something that we take for granted now. And I bring this up because we have younger listeners to the show that are just used to, they can just record something on their phone and they can, then there you have it. You have a recording. Is it something you want to put up to share? Not necessarily, but you have the ability to do it. This is a different world, and as far as that goes. Like it was, the solutions were more technologically low tech in that way. Was that useful as far as getting the band up to where it was as a unit, being able to like listen back to stuff?
Well, to address the playing a lot of notes quickly in a short period of time, there's nothing superior about that. I think it's a very misunderstood. If someone can play really fast, it's a very common thing in drumming right now. There's a lot of drummers that can play 1,000,000 miles an hour. that's a certain skill set. It's like being able to run fast or something.
Right.
But it's more often than not, very little creativity to it, very little musicality to it. It's just musical masturbatory musicianship in a lot of cases. I don't
Academic
find it
decathlon drumming is what I call it, by the way.
yeah, it doesn't. It just doesn't do it for me. I see it a lot. I do have people had been encouraging me to get Instagram, which I did, and I see a lot of drumming on there. I don't spend a lot of time on there. Every single drummer I see plays 1 million miles an hour, and I just never see anyone play anything mid-tempo. Almost all of my favorite music is mid-tempo.
Yeah,
all of my favorite drummers are pretty minimal. If you look at the list of, everyone throws out the great rock drummers of all time, nearly all of them are quite minimal compared to anything going on today.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It's weird to see, what the algorithm favors and what people again consider to be like.
It's impressive. I think so. I think we're in a world where a lot of people spend a lot of time, at home in the basement and become incredible players. But what they're not doing is playing with other individuals. So they're not allowing that space for the interesting bass line, the interesting guitar line, the vocal melody. So and then when you put them all together, it's a mess of everyone trying. It's like a competition of awfulness. And there's really busy bands that I enjoy. This Italian band Useta, where everybody's a busy player,
and it works somehow.
It's unlike the art and the automobiles and the design and the food of Italy, which in many cases are simple. They're kind of a complex and intricate band that manages musicality out of it, and they manage to, each one of them has their own space in that band somehow, where they're not walking all over each other all the time.
It's a fine balance beam to walk, though. It's so often not the case.
And they just tightrope it perfectly all the time. And then, the front woman has this incredible charisma and
she's awesome
presence. And the band never overshines that somehow, because they're all like these world-class players. So they're an ideal example of a band that figured out how to play 1 million miles an hour, play as much or a little as they want, but they make it work as a 4-piece and leave room for the front person. It's really impressive. It's not that I hate all music that's intricate or, I love amazing players. I'm impressed with ridiculous musicianship. I really do enjoy that stuff. But I'd also like to address your recording aspect of it, of course. So we're rehearsing in Steve's basement, and he did have a world-class sort of recording facility set up. But we were in the basement, and his control room was in the attic. So we never took advantage. It was always just the two of us there for the most part. And the only recording we did early on was boombox recording stuff on a cassette, I think, which is now voice memos on the iPhone, essentially. And I love the similar principle, there's an immediacy and a simplicity to it that works. And I'm still a big fan of the voice memo. Despite what people think Shellac doesn't, we never record rehearsals or anything in high quality fashion.
Well, and my understanding is that you're recording, when you actually are recording, you also don't do a ton of takes. It's usually like
we like a 3-take rule, which we've broken. But anything more than 3, when it comes time to listen to it, with 3 different opinions and 3 different takes, it's hard to agree on one, as is.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and as the numbers get greater, the decisions and disagreements become greater as well.
They grow exponentially, yeah.
Yeah, it's really true. So we don't, like I said, we have broken this rule, I'm sure, and you'll hear it time and time again from a lot of people say, the first take was the best, or we just caught the energy. You start to overthink things, I think, the more you record, which I think can be a problem. I've never used GarageBand or any of the current mediums, but I can see that being problematic where you can get the perfect take, or you think you can get the perfect take. So where do you draw the line? I think the question with all great art is, when is it finished? When is a great painting finished? When is a great sculptor finished? When is a great poem finished? So we have to learn how to edit ourselves and realize, is 100 takes, is that 101st take going to be better than the first
That's the
take?
one.
Because it seems they start to sound labored, I think, after a while, and it's tough to maintain that energy also.
It loses immediacy as well, often. Not always, but it often will lose as people start thinking about it more. It doesn't have that freshness necessarily.
It can be a challenge. Yeah, recording in the studio is a challenge. It still is for me. I think I've made more than 30 records now between Shellac and Breaking Circus and Bricklayer Cake and Rifle Sport, but the not very frequently. There's always large time spans in between where you don't have headphones on. There isn't any tape rolling. No, there's not $1 going out the window every minute. And so you're in this relaxed atmosphere and just kind of doing your thing. And that's really comfortable for me. But recording gets intense. All of a sudden you have microphones all over the drum kit. You're isolated from your bandmates. You can no longer see, and you don't have that immediate intimacy. When you put headphones on, you become a little removed from your instrument right away. It becomes it's a foreign world for me, recording still to this day. So
drums especially. I have a little tip for drummers out there. It took me a while to realize, and it took me listening back to the first recordings I had made. I'm like, wow, the hi-hat is just really tight. You can hear the pressure on the hi-hat, and there's no sizzle, which I'm a big fan of, a big sizzly, swishy hi-hat. And a lot of that just came from having headphones on, being a little tense, and like overdoing everything, overcooking everything, and including the pressure on the hi-hat. And it occurred to me, if I keep one ear off with my headphones, I'm a little more in tune with the drum kit and how it sounds to me when I'm rehearsing or playing a live show. So I like to have one ear on and one ear off. The ear on allows me to hear Bob and Steve, because we're recording as a live band. We're not recording as a click track. For those of you recording to a click track, I sympathize with you. I did that once on a Flower record where I programmed the drums and thought, yeah, this will be a breeze. I'll just play on top of my drum programs. But, ridiculously challenging. It felt like I was running along with a leash around my neck the whole time. So, Shellac doesn't put ourselves in that position. We try to track everything as a live band. I keep one ear on to hear Bob and Steve and, some of the drum kit components, and then one ear off to hear the liveliness of the kit that I'm used to hearing, the nuances like the hi-hat, the rolling and buzzing on the snare drum, things like that are hard to hear with headphones on. Well, and I think what you're talking about is the difference between hearing drums and hearing individual drum. And maybe overthinking or compensating for things that aren't there too, and that's a great tip. I mean, they should have that up on a wall for like anyone recording.
Another tip for drummers and engineers, and you can tip Steve monetarily for this little bit of advice. I hope he doesn't mind me sharing. But the first time Steve and I recorded together, I noticed, we went around the drum kit. And I would hit the snare drum, and there'd be what some people may consider unflattering overtones. And I'd say, hey, there's a little hum there, there's a little buzz there or something. He'd say, don't worry about it. And I'd do a mounted tom, and there'd be the same thing. Hey, what do you think about that tom? And he'd say, I'll record it. You can come in and listen to it. We'd do the floor tom, and it would be the same thing. Hey, there's a weird woof to the floor tom, right? Some woof down there. And we'd go through the whole kit, and me having done this with a couple of engineers in the past would notice something unusual about every instrument when it was isolated, every drum, as you say, or every instrument. But the fact of the matter is, we don't play music like that. We don't play the drum kit like that. We don't record songs like that. And when you play a drum kit live, just even a mid-tempo thing or quite sparse and slow thing, rarely do any of those things reveal themselves. And I think what we do is we have a tendency to overcook things in the setup prior to recording. Everybody's trying to zero in on that perfect snare drum sound. So it's more duct tape, more moon gels, whatever people are using, tuning. And a lot of times just killing the beauty of the instrument or the natural essence of the instrument. And so, I learned that really early on with Steve, just for the most part, let the instrument sound like it, tune it well, make sure it's in good tune, make sure you have decent heads on it. But don't overanalyze each drum individually. Try to think of the drum kit as one instrument, as a whole. And then if you track with a bass player and guitar player, those overtones just become part of the music. And a beautiful part of music, a lovely part of the instrument as well. So a little bit of advice, something I learned from Steve that that's still how we approach recording till this day. Not much has changed since that first record we made.
I mean, listen back to like so many classic records, right? There's things like that all over the place where, if you were to sit there and isolate this one part, it would sound like garbage, but it sounds like the most amazing thing ever in the context of what it is,
You will not hear a lot of that on today's contemporary recordings. People, once we realize, hey, we can retrack it or we can loop it or whatever people do. I don't know what they do. But you don't hear a lot of some of the fun things are here. There's famous bits and pieces on a lot of records where you hear the drum click. You hear someone, not the click track, but clicking sticks or catching a rim or in some cases hearing the drummer breathing hard in between, in the dead parts. So these are cool, right? These are things we still talk about till this day.
Absolutely. And something you mentioned earlier that when people are doing digital recording, there's a thing that's grid chasing, they call it, where like you have like the rhythm grid, and people are very they want to hit every part of the grid exactly where it should be. And again, if you listen back to these quote unquote classic records, it's like, they speeds up, slows down all over the place, man.
I'm a massive fan of. I'm a massive. If you want to talk tempo swings, you'll note there's 2 or 3 examples on Shellac records that are painfully obvious. And the first thing I think is we did a track. It's called New Number Order. Not my song, but not my idea. And how that ended up on a Shellac record is we're doing, I believe it's on 1,000 hertz.
Yeah.
And that session went shockingly well. The recording went really, really quick. We probably did a lot of those were 1, 2, 3 takes at tops. And we ended up finished really early in the evening, and everything was set up, and we're like kind of bored going, I guess we can have dinner and mix tomorrow. And Steve says, hey, Todd, do you have any Bricklayer Cake songs that you haven't recorded? And I said, yeah, I have a song it's a conceptual idea more than anything. And the idea about the new number order was, what if we took numbers 1 through infinity and just shuffled them up and mixed them around? And he's like, what's the point? And I'm like, everybody would have a different address, a different telephone number, different social security number, different bank account, different amount of money. There's a lot of interesting things that come with this concept. And Bob and Steve right away are like, oh, that's great. And then I'm like, the idea was because it was at the time when everyone was making these Pro Tool records and everything was perfect, annoyingly so, right?
Yeah. Soullessly, some might say.
Those tempo swings, the ups and downs had come out of we just heard nothing like the Rolling Stones' Midnight Rambler has this magnificent tempo swing. The Doors' LA Woman has this magnificent tempo swing. All the great bands did it. The Beatles, The Who, The Kinks, The Sweet, right?
Yes.
These are people that were fantastic at pushing and pulling. and making things really exciting. So the idea with New Number Order was to make it painfully obvious. Like the tempo swing there is just, push and pull the whole time.
Yeah.
I think that was like a one take thing because the playing is elementary. And I said to Bob and Steve, just pick a chord, chug on a chord, and go up and down, and I'll push and pull the tempo a little bit, and I'll mumble a few ridiculous numbers over the top. And we did it in probably an hour, and it wasn't supposed to be on the record, but then Steve was such a fan of it, and he thought it had so much personality, and he wanted to reveal the side of the band. Like, he's like, Bob gets to sing, I get to sing, we write a lot of lyrics for the band, and you're the only one that, doesn't get to display these things. And I still have no interest in it, to be honest, in Shellac, because I can do my own thing.
You have your own outlet for that, for sure.
Yeah. And, that gets cited as the worst Shellac song ever. And I'm kind of I'm flattered by that because it is high concept that's over most of those people's heads. Yeah. But we've done other things as well. Most notably, probably the a song called the Radio Song, which was a very popular Shellac song. And the Radio Song, again, was the whole intention was to see if Bob and Steve could kind of hold it together while I pushed and pulled and pushed and pulled.
Yes.
And, that's a fun one to play live because sometimes it's a real struggle for Bob, especially because he's just trying to anchor the whole thing down with simple chord, right? But it is not easily done when I'm intentionally trying to push and pull everything. So,
can I tell you, Todd, that's been the end theme of this show since 9 years ago when I launched it.
Ah, fantastic.
I mean, obviously the recorded version, not a live version that pushes and pulls. But it's been the end theme of this show since the inception.
Amazing. Well, I think now that you say that, I'm aware of that, Conan. Yeah, I'm aware of that. Cool. It's an interesting song. It has the potential to go a lot of directions every night.
Yeah.
My drumming is different every night, but it's Steve that really makes that song. And
with the talk up and the
his ability to improv from night to night is nothing short of amazing and entirely shocking, and it keeps the band interesting for Bob and I. And
sure.
Nobody would realize it unless they were seeing show after show after show. But he does it in a few different songs where he will either tell a different story or he just improvs the lyrics for End of Radio, and they're frequently quite different, and they're always incredible and amazing. And I don't know how he does it. He can do it in front of small crowds. He can do it in front of massive crowds. He's completely bulletproof when it comes to just improving and winging it. It's really remarkable. He's an amazing front person. He makes that song.
I think I've seen you guys, I believe at last count was 32 different times all over this country and a few times in Canada.
Oh, thank you very much.
Over the years. And I remember it was not the first, but the second night in Oakland at New Parish that I think was my favorite Interradio.
It's great
version.
that you have a favorite.
Yeah.
I love it.
And I specifically recall that one. And now I couldn't tell you specifically what it was, but it still sticks out at me as like, wow, that was like the best version of that I had heard, or like the one that just hit exactly right for me, I guess.
Well, that's great. And some nights it's magical and incredible, and other nights it's so. But it has the potential to be something more than what you hear on the record every night.
Well, and there's a theatricality to it too. You pick up the snare drum, kind of cart it around a little bit, and there's a whole showmanship element to it. Lead drums.
So that some of that stems from the shoegazing. We were the early stages of Shellac were probably the later stages of some of the shoegaze stuff was really popular. For those of you not in the know of shoegaze, just standing on stage and gazing at your shoes. And I was a rocker kid. I went to every arena show as a kid, starting really young, probably 12, 13. I saw the AC/DCs and Kiss, bands that could really entertain 20,000 people. And they put on a show. Every song was a thing. Every song was a production. And by Shellac is not one of these bands, right? We're this minimal band that we talk about. Not every song is a production at all, but I do believe in performing, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah. Recording is recording, rehearsing is rehearsing, and performing is performing. I see all of them slightly different, although I'm always doing what I do. And I do believe in entertaining. I've seen shows that are really entertaining. I've seen some amazing bands that just aren't entertaining. Yeah. And it can be pretty dull as much as I might love them. I'm a fan of the performance aspect. So I'm a bit of a, performer to an extent. There's a few moments in every Shellac show, totaling 5 minutes out of an hour and a half that are performing, right? But we do a little bit of performing, and we do attempt to entertain a little bit. Yeah, we're on stage playing to people. There's no denying that.
Like there's the very high cymbal, and then the three you get around it and kind of circle around it. This is incredibly difficult to describe. As I started that sentence, I'm like, this is going to be a difficult action to describe. But it's when I first saw that, I was like, oh, that's great. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, a lot of people. So I have a very minimal drum setup as well for a lot of reasons, and early on, our tours were long and kind of brutal and grueling, and I still tech myself, if you will, set up my own kit every night, tear my own kit down.
Rototom, stay at home when you're doing that,
And or even additional toms and cymbals.
Good point.
I had I had a boom stand, which was a lot longer than it is now. It was busted at a venue in London one night by an amazing, we were playing like on the third floor of this building in London, and this incredibly massive security guard, a really great guy, is like, here, let me move that for you. And he grabbed what was probably close to a 10-foot cymbal at the time, because I pieced everything together to make it as tall as possible. And he didn't realize how heavy it was with the cymbal on top, and the thing tipped and split. Like he busted a big chunk of it off. So it's a little shorter than it used to be. But he was kind enough to carry most of our gear up and down the stairs.
Oh, hey, I mean, it's a good trade-off.
So now that you addressed the cymbal thing, thank you for acknowledging that, Conan, because I've had several people say, you're copying the dude from Battles.
I was going to say, John ripped you off.
No. Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying so.
I was there, man.
Okay, cool. All right. And there are photos to prove it.
Exactly.
So, but he's a phenomenal drummer. Not a fan of the current band as much as the previous band. Ridiculously, wickedly cool drummer. So I'd love to see that he's got the high cymbal, but I'll take credit for me. And for me, he uses it as part of his kit, part of his setup. Yeah. For me, it's an accessory. It's a prop. And I play it once or twice a night at the most. When I was younger, I used to hold that thing out in the crowd and throw sticks in the crowd. That's when it was a lot of fun. And I'd let the crowd play the cymbal. But I've had all sorts of shit happen where people would take the cymbal off.
Whoa.
People would yank me into the crowd.
Yeah.
So I'm a little less adventurous than I used to be with the 10-foot tall cymbal. But that used to be the star of the show, the 10-foot tall cymbal.
Well, because you see it. And you're like, well, they got to play it at some point. It wouldn't be on there if it's like Chekhov's cymbal, right?
Well, when I play it, it's amusing. When I would throw sticks to the crowd and let the crowd play it, I would just hold it off the end of the stage.
Yep.
Those were the days. That was the real entertainment. I kind of missed people playing the cymbal because you would see people just light up, right? Their eyes would just light up. They're like, I'm playing the song.
That's a certain type of participation that you're not going to get at any other show too.
Yeah,
it's a pretty rare element.
All right, we're going to get that back into the rotation now that I think about it.
I'm not going to let the bad kids ruin it for the rest of the class.
Right, I can replace a cymbal.
Can we go back a little bit? I want to talk about Action Park, which, first of all, for literal years, I did not realize that there was an actual Action Park, and I saw the documentary about it, and I felt like a goober because I'm like, oh, there was a place called Action Park. I literally just thought it was a clever name for a record, even though there's like a freaking thing insert that has it. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't make the connection of those things. So first record, taking it back. It's got that really cool. Was it Fireproof press?
Yes.
So cool looking, hand pressed, Unipack style.
Or Dexterity press.
Oh yeah, it might have been Dexterity. Oh man,
Sorry.
Apologies.
It has been a long time. No, it's been such a long time.
Sorry, Jeff. And it's and
It
again,
is
especially
possible that it is possible the insert was done elsewhere, and Jeff does the jackets at Dexterity. A lot of printing and pressing going on in all of the Shellac records, as you well know, or you may know.
Yeah, no, and that's and they each have like a unique aesthetic and something super cool with it. And we'll get into that. I want to stick with Action Park for now because being the first record, I mean that was at the time there really wasn't anything that I can think of that was like sounding like that at the time, and it was a very much a statement of intent sort of record. Do you remember like the first song that was like that ended up on there that you wrote? Because if I remember correctly, you guys kind of tend to just write songs when you write them, and then, hey, look, we can collect this into a record now. But was that the case early on? Like, did you have like a bucket one, bucket two kind of situation for these?
I think in retrospect, we kind of missed the mark a little bit, in my opinion, because when Steve and I talked conceptually about what we liked about our previous bands, our favorite things about them, and our favorite formats and mediums, we were both massive fans of like 4 or 6 song EPs. I'm a big fan of a 6-song, 12-inch EP, and I'm not a big single guy, to like singles 45 guy. It's they can be a little bit labor intensive if we start to go down like, hey, we're going to listen to singles. It requires a lot of effort, and I feel like LPs have a tendency to get long occasionally, and I always felt like the EP was kind of the perfect format. So I think
you wanting more, almost, right? Like you want.
It's rarely too much, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like it's the right amount. I also feel like with a band like us, where our productivity is sketchy, our time is limited. We could have done a lot more EPs and kept a little more consistency to things, and an album every 6 to 8 years, whatever it is now.
Yeah.
So I probably would have done it differently. I probably would have not done the singles. What I would have done is I'd do an EP. Even, I was influential in this band, but Steve was definitely had strong ideas about doing singles.
Yeah.
And so there were maybe 5 or 6 songs on those first few singles. I don't even remember. And then I think what came next was just the next songs we were writing were the next 8 or 10 that turned out to be on Action Park.
The next batch.
So it was, the next batch essentially, which was just kind of a consistent order, because Steve had the recording studio in his house at the time. Those singles were quite easy to crank out because I would go there for a weekend and we'd record a single, and then later on he ended up building a proper studio, and it required a little more planning.
Sure. And there is ideally, yeah. But then also, I mean, I think about in the greater pantheon of Shellac songs, personally, I'm a huge fan of like Billiard Player Song, Doris, Wing Walker. Those are like some of my favorite tunes, and like those are so early on. And in my memory, it's like, oh, those are on Action Park. It's like, oh no, those are on 7-inch. Actually, I do know that because I had to sell one of them to pay rent some years back. Somebody paid an unorthodox amount of. It's much better now, but I was glad to have the record because it helped make up the difference on a rough month.
Fantastic records, but they're really labor intensive, hard for us to make.
Yeah,
I think I spent I was in Chicago for a few years, and I think I made like 6,000 or 8,000 of them myself. They
hand
required
stamping
a lot
them,
of
right?
hand stamping,
yeah.
A lot of ridiculous folding and stuffing, a lot of work. And I got on Steve and Bob. I'm like, hey, this is ridiculous. We need to find an easier way to put these singles out, which we've talked about and we have a plan for it, but in typical Shellac fashion, it's taken us over a decade to get that idea together. But hopefully that
Sure,
will come
yeah.
a little more available for people at some point.
That's
I
lovely.
do think those early singles are great, and it's kind of unfortunate that they're not very available.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's, I guess if you're someone that just throws it on the internet and pushes a button and like that's good enough for you, that's fine. But again, it's, I guess the limited nature of it. Well, it served me for that one scenario, but I do miss. I'm like, I wish I hadn't had to sell that. That would have been cool to keep that.
Most people probably are not aware that they even exist. Most
There's that
people think
too.
of Action Park as the first record.
Yeah, which is a great first record. I mean, I think that that's definitely there's growth on all of the records, and you do different things on all of them, but there's sort of a sparking of the imagination on that one that, again, conceptually, it's you guys doing your thing, but like I feel like there's elements of it that are coming from like, stuff like the Minutemen did, but like doesn't sound anything like the Minutemen as well. Just like the interplay, everybody like having moments to shine, but kind of bringing it back in, putting it back out, getting intense, bringing it back down again. Like really just like a precursor for a lot of what's to come for the band at that point. I think it's a hell of a record.
Thank you.
What do you remember about recording it?
The recording of it was, what we did is we tracked that entire record in London in a very small studio called Southern Records.
Oh, sure.
On a drum kit that I was not comfortable with at all. It was a Premier kit with power toms. And it was
really.
I'd played a classic rock kit in Rifle Sport, so
yeah,
for drummers in the know, not to get technical, but sort of a 22, 13, 16 setup, typical rock sort of thing.
Yeah.
But when Shellac started, I would fly to Chicago, as I said earlier, and ended up playing the only drum kit Steve had at the time was more of a jazz kit at 20, 12, 14, so a smaller drum.
Really small, yeah.
And at first they felt like a toy to me, so I'd rehearse it until I'd get comfortable on them all weekend and then come back to Minneapolis and go to Rifle Sport rehearsal. I'd be like, wow, these things are enormous.
It's like you're driving a tank suddenly, yeah.
My analogy was simply one was a sports car and one was a sedan, essentially.
There you go.
And,
perfect, yeah.
And so I was used to playing that little kit for Shellac music, and we went to London and recorded that thing on a large drum kit. And Steve, he trusted John Loder, one of the only engineers that Steve really trusted. So we tracked it all at his place with the intention of also, we were on tour as well. So we played some shows. We tracked all 10 songs or whatever it is at Southern in London. And then we played some more shows and ended up outside of Paris in a city called Nantes at a studio called Black Box with an engineer named Ian Burgess, who was another English guy who served a lot of time in Chicago, and Steve would cite as very influential in his early education as a recording engineer. And so Ian lived in Chicago for a long, long time, and when he decided to leave CRC, Chicago Recording Company, where he worked, he moved to France and bought a farm and built this studio in the barn. So we then went to the barn and we tracked that same record. I think Loder was along as well. John was there as well, the English guy from Southern. And so between John Loder engineering the Southern session and then going to France, Black Box, and having both John and Ian, the studio owner, on hand, Steve trusted both those guys immensely. So we tracked all 10 songs there as well. And that was the idea, that they would be dynamically quite different, because John's studio in London, Southern, was really dry and flat sounding. And then Ian's studio in France, Black Box, was very ambient and open sounding. So then we just sort of sat down and we're like, wow, this sounds nice, and this song sounds great, really tight and kind of compact, and then this song sounds really great, big and wide open. And I think we chose the probably 5 from one session and 5 from another. Essentially, is what we did for that record.
Did any of them kind of come harder than others to do, or are they all relatively easy to record?
To perform?
Yeah.
If listening back, there's a couple things I would have taken another shot at, but I was living hard by the early on Rifle Sport, Bricklayer Cake, Breaking Circus. We really took a take or two, and that was it. We didn't have budgets or time to do any more than that, so you kind of lived with your best shot. Kind of like with film, right? You took a couple pictures, and those are the pictures instead of 1,000. So I kind of miss those days. I myself am guilty of taking too many pictures now. But
it's easy to do.
I think there's a couple. There's a song. There's a song called Il Porno Star.
Yeah.
There's a bit of an open drum thing where Steve wanted me to kind of just solo throughout the whole beginning. Yeah, I'd probably take another couple swings at that if I had my choice. But otherwise, I don't listen to that record, in all honesty. I know it's a big favorite of fans. But I'm proud of it. I love it. I think that I remember that time fondly. I remember it was very challenging for me to even sit down by the time we got to France, because the throne that I had on that tour was about an inch thick tops. It was like the most uncomfortable thing in history. And I think we'd done probably a week's worth of shows, spent a few days in Southern recording, then another week's worth of shows. And by the time we got to France, it was hard for me to sit at the kit, to be honest.
Oh, man.
So I remember it being painful. Recording
That's
it
real.
was painful, and the flight home was even more painful. But the record, it's a great record.
It's funny you mentioned.
And I remember John. I remember John, and I remember Ian being there, which we haven't been able to do that since those two are no longer with us. So
it would be difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny you point out a Porno Star because I actually know a drummer who mentions that specific drum break as like an incredibly influential. Like, I want to play drums because of this moment.
No, that's fantastic. Love it. I don't know that it would be any better. I remember being, we've got a couple of records where the End of Radio is an improv thing. Steady as She Goes is an improv thing. And in retrospect, sometimes I think I'd like to have another swing at those. I do, but they are what they are at the time. And yeah, every night can be better or worse. It is what it is. That's what makes performing live exciting.
Absolutely. And why it makes it a unique experience and different.
Exactly.
The Futurist is an interesting record. There's an interesting concept behind it. How did that all come together? Because I don't think I've ever heard the full story.
Oh, it wasn't our concept. It was we were approached by a Canadian dance troupe called La La Human Steps, and they happened to be using the Action Park record in a lot of their warm-ups. And I think that what would they do? At the time, what they were doing was just commissioning some of their favorite artists to record instrumental pieces of music, and we were on their list, and we decided to get together. I think it was 30 minutes of music is what they wanted for a dance production. So it was all instrumental intentionally. It was never designed to be released as a record, and it wasn't. It hasn't been. And after the recording, Steve and all of us liked it so much. He's like, hey, I have an idea. I know how we could really spend way too much money that we don't have by making really expensive pressings and ridiculous jackets and sending them all over the world to friends and people that helped us. I think there's still half of those records never made it to I'm exaggerating. A good 100 of them never reached their destinations. And I even tried rounding up those people's addresses when I lived in Chicago for a few years and resending them all. And I bet 75 of those came back. So Steve has a master plan now about how to find those 75 people. So we'll see if that can happen in the next decade.
So it's kind of a long game, but I mean it's interesting because it's in movements, right? Because that's what we need to do for dance. It's in movements.
That's a really cool record. I'm a big fan of the music. You know, the music is great. I thought it was really cool. They did invite us to that production, which would have been incredible to see, but again, it would have cost me a few $1,000s to get there. So I think it was at Montreal is where they were. I believe it was Montreal.
Well, there's the crazy like oscillator stuff and like the Morse code and things like that. Like it's
cool.
It's a cool record.
Yeah. I played a little guitar on there. I think Steve might even played some drums on that. I don't remember, but that was a fun one to make because it was just, you know, the idea of, hey, what would a dancer want to hear? Let's do some awkward rhythmic stuff. That was a fun record. Yeah.
Because you're going to be thinking about it differently than if you're just writing a song, you know, as you typically would for the band. You're going to be thinking about it differently.
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Was it fun doing Terraform? Was that the Abbey Road one, right? Is that there? Or
that was Abbey Road. No, we did Abbey Road. We did a full session there, and then we did a full session in Steve's basement.
Yeah.
I think he still had the basement studio. So again, half of it is Abbey Road recordings, half of it is Steve's basement. We did the same thing. Just listen to both, like one take of the same song in each studio, and say this one sounds best like this, and just split them up. Same concept.
I'm a big fan. I'm a big old space nerd. So I love the cover on that one. The
Chesley Bonestell.
Great artist. Like just real cool stuff.
Yeah.
Now, didn't we deserve to look at you the way you really are? 12-minute song. With, again, when people are talking about recording now, they're usually thinking of digital recording and you know. And being able to quickly like patch things together, slice things up, and whatever. You were not doing that though. This you were doing it as like a whole take, correct?
So, first, Conan, I should let you know it's 8:02.
Okay.
So, let's keep on task here.
Okay. Fair
before we lose everyone's interest.
Yeah.
That was an interesting. That was Abbey Road. We were at Abbey Road.
Yeah.
John Loader was engineering that. So. I think the control room was one flight up from the studio.
Yeah.
And he knew this was going to be a long song. So we're quite clear about, hey, is there enough tape on the reel to get this, what could be 10 or 14 minutes? It could be different every night.
Yeah.
Every time we play it. And I remember just feeling like the tempo started at just a really comfortable tempo, and everyone felt just settled in, and I felt like we were nailing this thing flawlessly, and we probably got to like the 11-minute mark, and we get a, hey guys, we're out of tape. And I was, do recall losing my temper briefly and mildly, because I felt like there's no way we're going to knock this 12 or 14 minute song out and capture that feeling. So we went up, everybody took a deep breath, threw a new reel of tape on, and we went down there and we actually caught that first take. I think that's a first take with a new reel. Yeah. So fortunately it didn't turn into a production.
Yeah, because I mean that's a long that's like, breaking your leg 2 feet from the finish line or something. Yeah, that's crazy.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic song. Great to listen to.
Yeah.
If you drop the needle a couple seconds in sometimes, and instead of hearing do 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 do, you'll hear do 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 do. It's quite fascinating how that can be listened to in sort of two different wavelengths.
I heard you guys
or meters
play that a bunch, and I think I remember the morning show at the Great American Music Hall with MX80, and Bob started with the riff while you guys were setting up, which was astounding to me because I was like, oh, wow, all right, because I knew the song, but I was like, is he just gonna? Oh, he's doing it. Okay. It was very inspiring.
Yeah. We've done 30-minute versions of that. I'm quite sure, where Bob would set up. Steve and I would go down in the dressing room and do whatever we were going to do,
Yeah.
and take our time and get back on stage and continue the song. Fun. You're reminding me of things we should be doing again, Conan.
Yeah, I mean, these are all great antics, you know.
Get that 10-foot cymbal back in the crowd. Open with once we get on stage, Bobby can nail the riff. This sounds like good ideas.
And I remember, first time I think I heard you guys play it when Bob changed, like when he just did do 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 do. Everyone started applauding because it was different.
Yeah.
And it was like one of the cooler moments for that. And I also appreciated that like the whole thing was over and I was like, oh, it's like the middle of the afternoon. Great, that's awesome.
Oh yeah, those morning shows. Those are my ideas because going to Chicago and doing this early recordings with Steve was so absurd and weird and cool.
Yeah.
The first ones we did were in Minneapolis, and we did them with Pop-Tarts.
Yeah.
I got toasters from a bunch of neighbors and friends and family, and I think I bought 480 Pop-Tarts and scattered them all over the bar at 7th Street. Brought down an espresso machine and just let everyone serve themselves. And we did a 10 a.m. show, and those are we've done probably 8 or 10 of them actually. London, San Francisco, Chicago, Minneapolis, always very memorable, super fun shows.
There was donuts.
Krispy
and I think
Kremes.
One of the LA ones had that as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, sure. Very memorable and remarkable shows.
How about Copper? Is like a relatively straightforward song for you guys. Was there any idea for sequencing of like, hey, we start with like maybe like one of the more like ambitious like artistic songs and then like end it with one of the more straightforward, or was that ever considered at all?
Sure, we would have just talked about what makes an interesting opener and which we finish with, and we do give a lot of thought to sequences. I don't remember what the thought was at the time. It's
a good tune. I like it. I mean, it's a good record.
I think it puts a lot of people off from that record, but we live in a short attention span world. But I don't. Bob and Steve and I aren't from that world, So I think the payoff is better on a song like that, right? When the movements or the change happens, it's like minimalist art. Sometimes it's less is more.
People break out into applause when the bass changes, right? I mean, it's a great moment.
So the bass line is really remarkable. Steve's little guitar flourish is remarkable. My drum fill is remarkable. If we would have made that in a 2-minute song, like a compact little rock song, I don't think any of it would have been remarkable.
Probably wouldn't have had the same impact, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. And
before we move on, Canada, I remember distinctly seeing you not just in Vancouver, but in Victoria with Silkworm.
Wow,
and,
yes.
I remember I think it was that one. It was the Shellac t-shirts, but there was the maple leaf around that. I thought that was a nice merchandise tie-in of like the Canadian ones.
Right, correct. I don't remember who. Not my idea. Someone more clever than myself. Yeah.
The song Canada. I always liked that one. Can you tell me anything about that one?
That's an unusual song, only in the sense that I wrote the lyrics for Canada. Canada were after a tour that I was just making slight observations about Canada, which we used to poke fun at Canada. Now it seems, I don't know that that's the case anymore.
Yeah.
So, and I'm no longer allowed in Canada, which is also quite sad because we get a lot of fans going, they play Europe all the time and the United States. And I was arrested in Pittsburgh, I think in 1988 or 1989 with a few grams of weed on tour. And somehow I was able to get into Canada a couple times where it wasn't an issue.
Right.
The last time we were up there, it was just to play Toronto and Montreal. They stopped me at the border. They found my arrest record somehow was still on file. It was 15 years ago, I think someone told me. So it was that should have been off my record. I don't know how it was on file. But they were going to they wanted to send me back, which would have our next show, I think, was going to be Cleveland or something, but it would have been 3 or 4 days later. So we were just going to drive to Cleveland and hang out. We had some planned, and they finally said, look, I think they checked with Lee's Palace in Toronto, and they checked whatever the venue was in Montreal, and see that we had 2 sold out shows, and they gave me a 4-day visa, and then they gave me a ton of paperwork that needed to be completed if I were to ever come back. And so Bob and Steve wanted me to do it. I wanted to do it, but my legal consultation was, I actually ended up with a drum student who, her uncle happened to be the lawyer for the mayor of Toronto that was busted for snorting cocaine.
Ford, yeah.
And she says, I'm going to set you up with, I have a great lawyer for you. And I'm sure, I have no doubt he was, but he wanted $1,500 just to get started with my case. And I told Bob and Steve, look, I don't have $1,500 to get back to Canada. So anyway, the song Canada was written before then, when I was legally allowed in the country, and just has some clever name, like clever little bits, like, you know, Canada backwards is Anadak. Just Anadak. And then I think Steve might have added or changed a few things, and it's just one of our more straightforward kind of rock songs.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, I didn't write the music, I wrote the lyrics, and it's when we were kind of early stages of collaboration. Steve wondered if I had any lyrics that might be interesting on the records. That's where that came from.
Well, it's a good one. 1,000 Hertz. 1,000 Hertz is the next one. That's comes in the tape box.
Are we going to go through all the records?
You know, at this point, you know, if you can.
Okay.
we you know,
quickly.
Yeah. We don't need to linger necessarily, but it'd be cool to touch on each of them. I mean, I'm liking this.
Okay.
Comes in like the old Ampex box, right? They had like the tape.
Steve's idea.
Yeah. Cool packaging. Yet again, comes up again.
Thank you.
And then and it's also got the starting. It's like the calibration thing, right? The thing that when you calibrate the instruments, it's like a very like you get the 1,000 Hertz thing.
Right, when you're calibrating 2-inch tape,
right.
The test tones. Yep, exactly.
Tell me about this record. So I think this is one. The studio's already in place at this time, right? Because it's like, what, 2000?
Yeah, I think it was all recorded at Steve's studio and probably split between Studio A and Studio B. But I don't think we tracked, you know, the entire thing and then A-B'd songs. I think we just picked half of the record to record in the big open ambient room and then half of the record to record in the dry, dead room, if my memory serves me correctly. I think that's how that was done.
Good recording experience on this one?
Yeah, very comfortable, because at that time, as soon as Steve sold his house and moved the studio to the building became our rehearsal space. So it was very comfortable in that sense. Like, hey, we're in the building that as opposed to Abbey Road, which was intense, or Ian's studio, Black Box in France, which was intense. You know, it felt like we were on our home turf, so there was an element of comfort to that. My own drum kit, a lot of favorable aspects to it.
But that's Philip Baker Hall that does the introduction, right? The character actor. That's
on 1,000 Hertz.
Yeah.
No. It's whoever. I think it's actually whoever did the. I think it's the guy that did the original recording of the test tones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds just like him. I like that guy. That actor is like a good that guy actor.
Okay, so. Yeah, sure. No, I think it's the original guy. A lot of those conceptual ideas, Steve's, but yeah, I think it's he's the genuine Louisville.
Right. Yes, that's true. Yeah. Which we'll get to that in a minute. But so that one's got, you know, Squirrel Song is a good one on there. That's I saw you guys play that and Watch Song a lot around then. Prayer to God seems to have struck a chord with all the worst people. That's a shame. But good, mean little opener. That's for sure.
Is that the first song on that record?
It is. Yeah. Prayer to God.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot to love here. How do you think that one sits in the pantheon, in the catalog? I mean, it's a little leaner and meaner, maybe, but
yeah, I don't I enjoy all of her records. I kind of see the band as one just long band. I don't really see like snapshots of, well, the singles were this and Action Park. If we go through it, I can kind of start to define these periods and the studios. But the way I perceive the band is just this long continuation of a band that's been writing songs. They're never, far more than lake to lake to lake to lake. It's a river.
Tell me about Mama Gina, because I saw that one kind of evolve and change and kind of contract and expand.
Yeah, another one of those where Steve would ad-lib some things. I don't think we played it live all that much.
Yeah.
It has a really brutal, I think the end of it has an incredible, just overblown guitar thing on it that's really cool. But yeah, that could be a little brutal live, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of awkward. Some material goes over well on record, and it doesn't so much in a live setting sometimes.
Right.
Or it doesn't even go over well live on records or on records sometimes.
And then he also mentioned I added on to ask you about New Number Order, but we talked all about that, so we'll skip that one.
Yep.
Excellent Italian Greyhound. First of all, Uffizi, right? That's how you say it. R.I.P.
Correct. Yeah.
Love the album art on this one.
Oh yeah.
It's really cool.
I have another Italian Greyhound now. Let me know if you'd like to see him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I would.
Apollo. Hey, Apollo.
Fantastic. We can Protonic Reversal exclusive here.
Yeah, well, let's get him. Hey, come here. Someone wants to see you. Yeah. Wow.
Hey, it's Apollo. Oh, so cute.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's no Uffizi. He's at Apollo. Yeah.
How did you get involved with the Italian Greyhound? Like, how did you come to know them as a dog breed?
Well, I literally just happened to be walking through a park one day, and I saw this couple sitting on a blanket with an Italian Greyhound. I had never seen one.
Yeah.
And I noticed a dog probably like 25 feet away, and it just was staring at me. It was like looking right into my eyes. And I thought, wow, this is the most genuine looking creature I've ever seen. And so I just stopped and said, hey, can I pet your dog? And I just found it to be I've always been a dog lover.
Yeah.
And was completely fascinated by him at the time. And so I started doing some research. I bought a book called The Official Guide to the Italian Greyhound and read the entire thing, and then realized this could be a really great dog for me. And, Uffizi was incredible. I had him for 16 years. He was amazing. This guy's too. He's a handful. Yeah, but he's pretty amazing too.
Yeah, they're wonderful dogs. I was lucky enough to have it was a full-size Greyhound named Science in my life for
incredible.
a long time. And real beautiful creatures. All of them, Whippets, Italian Greyhounds, like the whole.
I love the Sighthounds.
Yeah,
yep.
Absolutely.
So back
to Excellent Italian Greyhound, the record.
Yeah.
We talked about End of Radio sort of at length. I obviously favor the song. It's been a key factor of the show for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Steady as She Goes. That was also in the Burn to Shine, if I remember correctly. I've got that DVD, right? There's like
correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another kind of classic Shellac song in the fact that like there's some kind of push and pull with things, right? Like where it's like the drums kind of get to be the lead instrument while the guitar is holding it down, kind of moments. How did that one come to pass?
I do quite a bit of that. In fact, on this last record, Bob said, "Do you always have to play a drum solo in every song?" I said, "No, I would prefer it if I never play a drum break in every song."
Yeah.
How about if you So I would encourage Steve to take it or Bob to take it. But I'm like, if you guys are going to chug along on the same riff, something has to happen.
Something
at
has
some
to
point in
change,
time.
right?
So I'm usually, essentially, Conan, I am the first one to get bored with our riffage or whatever, or the drum beat.
Awesome.
And feel like, so I force changes often where I just deviate from the band and start playing something else. It's kind of in my nature, I guess.
Yeah.
You hear it it's on every Shellac record for the most part, I think.
You have like an internal thermometer that like reaches a certain.
At some point, I feel like something, this has to change. Enough of this. Right?
Yeah. Good tune. I mean, it makes it certainly a unique composition in there. Maybe not necessarily unique within the Shellac pantheon, but like especially when you start with End of Radio, which is so gloriously dirge-like, and then you go into that, it gets peppy. to be reductive, it gets peppy.
I haven't listened to any of our records, so I do not remember sequences of anything. I'm more concerned now with live sequences where we're trying to play maybe, a live show that's cohesive, and I like to try to play something off of every, at least one thing off of every record.
And that's do you work it out ahead of time? Yeah, or is it because Fugazi is notably like they never have a set list and they just go and there's like 7,000 songs they could pull from any moment in time. Okay.
Yeah, and we've done that without the 7,000 songs, and of course, impressive the way they managed to do it.
Sure.
We did that. We no set list. We do occasionally play festivals, and these festivals which have typically set lengths, either 45 minutes, an hour and 15, whatever they may be, and found that a set list can be pretty helpful in those situations. But it's only been the last couple of years where and what we like to do there for the most part is pick the first two or three, pick a middle section maybe, and the middle section is just, there's a few songs we play in a different tuning, so we'll figure out, hey, where should we slice this different tuning into the mix, and then we'll pick what do we want to close with, and that's pretty much as close to a set list as we get.
Right. You have a beginning, a middle, and an end, which every story needs, right? So.
Yeah. But, I'm a fan of the set list as in a Bricklayer Cake setting. I feel like it's like putting a lot of thought into an album sequence.
Yeah, or mixtape or something, Yeah.
Yeah, there can be some continuity to it and some nice build, and it's a little easier to control that flow. But it's fun to be in a situation where anyone can call out whatever they want at a given time too, and that works. It's also it's failed spectacularly for us as well.
Well, fortune favors the bold, right? So
exactly.
How do you even go about recording Lulabelle? I mean, because that's something that has had so many. There were so many iterations. There's so many, and then of course within the recording, there's like the various guest shots. I guess would you call them guest shots?
Sure, yeah. Those all happened, after the fact, after the recording, and that pretty much like any other Shellac song. I think just try to get a good take.
Yeah.
I think that one's pretty structured, in all honesty, other than Steve's improv bit. But musically, I think it's pretty straightforward. Yeah. It was all about Steve's improv, I think.
Yeah.
Finding something that he could be satisfied with.
One thing that made me real happy with this record is getting a right proper recording of Smoke, which I've always liked as a song.
That was my idea because I felt like we had done a Peel session version of it. Yeah. And I always felt like it was just a high energy kind of ripper that we should have on record. So I think that was an older song we revived, and just to get it on record. Well, we would play it in shows all the time. I shouldn't say we revived it. I'm like, let's record it and throw it on a record. So yeah. And
it's got and the record has that little Who homage. The little jingle.
That might have been Bob's idea from the Roto Sound string thing, I think.
Yeah.
He's a Roto Sound guy. Yeah.
All right, so Dude Incredible.
Yeah.
Lots of so you got the the high gloss full color monkeys that are on that one. Again, nice chipboard album jacket.
Spectacular photo.
Yep, great stuff. And that's the one that has the lots of Surveyor stuff on there. Like there's like Surveyor, Mayor Surveyor, all the Surveyors. There's lots of surveying happening on this record.
Yep, far too much in my opinion. I lost a lot of arguments on that record.
Fair enough. Okay, well, good. I'm glad I don't.
Yep.
Glad I'm not too off base with that. That one I feel like was. Oh my God! What year did that come out? No, 2014. That can't possibly be 2014. Really? Wow. Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
No, I'm just. I guess I was doing this show when that record came out, and like that.
Okay,
But this show was like about 10 years old, so I guess that makes sense. All right, sure. Okay, sorry, mind blown. My bad. Yeah, I favor Riding Bikes. I think is a great song on there. Could you anything about that one you could share with folks?
I think we were all. I had recently gotten a bicycle for the first time in a couple of decades, and Steve had gotten a bicycle. Bob had kind of always been a cyclist. Yeah. So it was at point in the time that we were all kind of enjoying bicycling, which I still do.
Sure.
And so I think Steve was just inspired the fact that we were all kind of feeling like kids again and riding bikes. It's a fun song.
Yeah, and there's also, like when you grow up at a certain time, I guess you'd say that like there was a thing when I was a kid, like, oh, I'm just out riding bikes. All right, be back by evening.
It's an incredibly free. It's hard to describe the feeling of riding a bike. There's something really amazing and makes you feel independent and like a kid again. Really fantastic.
Yeah, you can go right out the canal and back. We're just riding bikes, It's amazing. Gary, that's Gary, Indiana, right? That's
correct.
That's okay, it was an amazing place to write a song for, because anyone that's ever been is. Yeah, it wouldn't be the first place you would think of as a destination location. Probably is the best way to put it. But
right,
hardscrabble little town,
to say the least.
To say the least, yeah. Any particular highlights for that one? I think that one did that one take longer to come together as a record than the others, or was that just from the outside that was the case?
You're speaking about the entire album, not just
the not just the recordings, because
we have a tendency to get hung up. I think all of our music generally happens quickly and organically.
Mm-hmm.
We get hung up with scheduling occasionally, just finding the time to be a band.
Sure.
And I think also we get hung up on artwork. Not so much me, but just between the three of us.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you spoke of, none of those jackets have been easy to assemble or print, or there's always an issue with our current record as well. I think it's been done for a couple of years, and it's we're always hung up on some ridiculous process. It's no one's fault. I'm not blaming anyone in the band.
Sure.
But sometimes we don't do things in a simple fashion.
Well, and then if you're trying to make some sort of quality,
I'm very proud of all of the.
Yeah.
Everything we make is incredibly high quality, and I'm incredibly proud of it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have it any other way. There's not a lot of efficiency to it on the downside.
Sure.
Yep. So it can be like for me. Yeah, we have a record which is now finished that you haven't heard.
I am excited to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm, the excitement of it is a little beyond me because it's been done for a couple of years, and that's the case with every record. The record's always going to be out much post excitement, right? But hopefully it will be exciting for everyone when it is released, and hopefully it will be soon.
That one has the does it have the Scrappers song?
It will.
Nice, I like that one. It's a good one.
Yeah. I'm very happy with this next record. I think it's fantastic.
Last thing on Dude Incredible, the title. That decision.
Dude Incredible, is that
Yeah.
Is
Like
that
it's no punctuation, more like an honorific or or something, right?
Well, I think the idea there was just the photo itself.
Yeah.
So, and for people that don't know, the photo is literally a monkey holding another monkey over its head, almost
great.
like a barbell,
Yeah.
and almost on a massive cliff. And it's hard to tell what's happening and what's about to happen. But Steve just felt like, if you look at this photo, isn't it like, dude, incredible? So I think it's more the dude incredible was a bit of an explanation, like the reaction to the photo.
Yeah.
And he just liked the fact that dude incredible sounded like an interesting album title, and we all agreed.
It absolutely is. I mean, it's and when you mention in conjunction with the album cover, it actually makes a ton of sense there.
Yeah, I think the photo was kind of, dude, incredible.
So we're wrapping it up here. I do want to just give a quick shout out to the End of Radio, the collection of the Peel sessions. I think was a really cool thing to put that out on a proper release. And gather it. I thought that was very thoughtful.
I like the idea of everything being available. I kind of had to push Bob and Steve for that.
Yeah.
Because we would get hassled at every show. Hey, what about those singles? When am I going to be able to get a single?
Yeah.
Or when am I going to be able to hear the End of Radio? These things that go out of print, or just we're too lazy to make them. Sometimes they're not just out of print, so not intentionally. So
nothing can be done.
I do like that. I do like that. They're available. They're weird little snapshots. Those Peel sessions are weird. I think you get like an hour or two. So they're essentially almost a live set. In fact, one of them is a live set in front of a crowd. So I think one of them is just a studio recording with very limited time. And then one of them is a studio recording in front of an audience of like 50 or something. They invite 50 people into the studio. So interesting little snapshots to what basically sets. Those are like mini sets.
Right.
So they're kind of cool in that respect. Songs off of various different records. Yeah, kind of what we were doing for shows at the time.
Different iterations, different things going on maybe on them than they would in the recording because they've had time to change and evolve. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Possibly.
I don't want to. I've really dominated your time here, Todd. I appreciate you being very generous with it. I do want to
for having me.
I really want to at least give a cursory mention to the drum instruction because I think you've done some great stuff with this. And for me, as an outside perspective, it really seems like finding people that are interested in the drums and teaching them to be creative in expressing themselves with drums instead of, learn drums the Todd Trainer way. Like, here's how you play this Shellac song. Like it's very much a thoughtful exploration of how to find your own voice with the drums. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah, early on you mentioned that I have a style that's instantly recognizable. That's by design. It's something I worked very hard at. And the first thing I try to do if a student comes in, or I'm also available online, is I tell people, hey, what we're going to do today is we're going to attempt to play drums like Conan.
Yeah.
You don't want to play drums like anybody else. And attempting to play drums like anybody else is a very unsatisfying endeavor. So I say, if we're just going to look at playing drums like Conan today, however Conan wants to, we can play as many drums, as few drums. We can play them as frequently or as minimally as we like. And just understanding when you're the one who's making the decisions, it's typically quite satisfying. I've had people come in and play really, really simple things that are really fascinating and interesting to me. I'm like, wow, I would never think about that.
Yeah.
And they've never sat down behind a drum kit before. And I've had people sit down and try and get really busy and kind of go for it and play solos. And there's always something really charming and awesome about that too. They've always imagined drums as this like super exciting, crazy action
hit this
thing.
And do this and you're over here.
and I love that too, because that's the individual expression that I seek to bring out in each student.
Yeah. No,
I
and
really do.
that's and I think that's a wonderful way to approach it, because you're always going to get so I talked to Dwayne Dennison, and he does guitar instruction. Literally the only
Fantastic.
guitar lesson I ever have taken in my entire life at the age of almost 46 was year before last, during the pandemic. I took one guitar lesson from Dwayne Dennison, and 96% of what he showed me was in one ear out the other. But he specifically honed in on the fact that I was like, oh, hey, I can do this thing that I'm doing for forever. Like, I'm pretty good at doing it, but I want new tools in the toolbox. I want to think differently about this.
Well worth it. Sometimes it's the approach or how we think about it.
Right.
So I get technical drummers that come in as well, and I just try. Oftentimes I'm not going to help them with their technique, but I'm going to help them with their approach. So,
absolutely.
But, so I do love it. It's really fulfilling, the instruction. It's incredibly satisfying to get a beginner, no matter what the age, just to play that kick snare. That first rock beat is really satisfying, but it's more satisfying to see people go in whatever direction. Inevitably, everybody ends up in their own direction, and I try to recognize it early on and encourage what I think is special and unique about each individual, and that's what I try to encourage. And what would be the word?
Nurture.
Exactly. That's a good word. Yeah.
I think it's lovely. I'm glad that you do it. And I think that there's something to be said for getting people, especially younger folks, excited about playing instruments too, and
absolutely
especially drums.
Yeah. And my fear is that the more we have interesting things at our disposal, cell phones, social media, GarageBand type things, which are all amazing, I do fear that we're going to have a lesser quality level of drummers in the future. And, we'll have these mind-boggling fast drummers and stuff, but I'm concerned about the creative aspect of drumming, and as opposed to the competitive aspect of drumming.
The academic decathlon drumming, right? Exactly.
Essentially, yeah.
Todd, this has been great, man. Thank you so much for doing this. It's been
Thank
far
you for
too long
having
coming.
me. I appreciate it.
The last thing I ever do in the show, it's the only canned question that I ever ask folks, and you can choose to interpret however you like. But why do you do what you do?
I would play drums and play guitar to amuse myself, whether anyone heard it or not, whether anyone was listening. I walk the dog because I enjoy walking the dog. It just doesn't get any press. Nobody, it doesn't appear on TV. Occasionally it appears on TV, but it's, why do you eat a cookie, or why do you bake a cake? That's the same reason I play drums, play guitar. Yeah, I love it.
Well, I love that you love it, and I love what you do, and I can't wait to hear this new Shellac stuff in 2030 or whenever that happens to be.
I'm very excited about it. It should be happening soon.
Fantastic. Well,
yeah, it is done. Everything's finished. In fact, I think we've got a test pressing back that was lesser quality than we were hoping. So we're really just down to test pressings at this point.
Lovely news.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it.
I am very excited about this record. I think it's going to be great.
Well, I hope you'll consider coming back when it's all in the ether, and again the dithering on the artwork and whatnot is all done. So,
be happy to.
All right, thanks so much, man.
Hey, Conan, have an excellent evening. Thank you for having me. It was an honor and a pleasure.
Take care, Todd.
Ciao.
There he goes, Todd Trainer. What a cool guy! That was so awesome of him to spend so much time hanging out with me. So let's why don't let's this is going to be interesting because we're going to actually hear two Shellac songs, because of course we end this show on a Shellac song. But let's hear, well, I mentioned it earlier. Why don't we listen to Excellent Italian Greyhound. There it is. So there she goes. Here we go. There you go. Steady As She Goes by Shellac. This is the first. We get to play the second song of a record as the outro song, and then the first song of the record as the actual outro of the show. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Hey, that was Todd Trainer. That was a pretty good time. I hope you guys enjoyed that. What a cool guy. Again, world-class drummer. You can find him on the Todd Trainer drumminginstruction.com website. You can find out all about taking lessons with him. And there you go. There's him online as well. The name of this show is Go Neutron Protonic Reversal. Thank you ever so much for listening to it. This show airs on Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific. Streaming YouTube and Twitch, podcasted later, everywhere, always. But early access, patreon.com/Protonic Reversal, $1 a month gets you that early access, helps support the show, keep the lights on, all that stuff. And it's always free, though. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding. So if you like the show, don't forget to like, subscribe on your platform of choice, share it around. All that helps people discover the show. It's deeply appreciated.
50,000 watts of power.
What do we got? We got a bunch. I'm back. I didn't even mention the fact that I've been on tour for the past 3 weeks, huh? Oh, well, nobody cares. It's great. It was an awesome tour. That's the update. But I'm back doing this. Bunch of episodes coming up. Brian Cook, Russian Circles, and Sumac and Botch coming up next. Gary Floyd of the Dicks. Stay tuned. It's gonna be a great fall. And stay safe out there.
Route 128, dark and lonely.
Take it easy.
I got my radio on.
Check you later.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio on. Can you hear me now? This is a test! If this had been a real emergency,